It is Thursday, January 23rd, 2025, and this is our first meeting of the new year. I am going to ask Rebecca to take a roll call so that we can call the meeting to order.
Great, thank you. Dr. Dara Thompson.
Present.
Dr. Mina Yoon.
Present.
Dr. Vera Singleton.
Dr. Singleton stepped away. She'll be right back in a minute.
Perfect, thank you. Dr. Mukherjee, since you're online.
Yes, present.
Thank you. Dr. Satara Tice.
Present.
Thank you. And Mr. Andy Yam.
Present.
Dr. Bruce Davidson.
Dr. Davidson is present but getting online, so.
Okay, sounds good. I will recall him in a moment. And please let us know when Dr. Singleton gets back in. Right now we do have 5, so we do have quorum.
I'm here, Rebecca. Thank you. Good morning. This is Dr. Singleton.
Great, thank you, Dr. Singleton.
Okay, apologies for that. This is Dr. Thompson. I was having a little technical difficulty there for a minute. So at this point, I would like to call our meeting to order. Sorry, still having a little issue with viewing the agenda and the WebEx at the same time. All right, we've established quorum. And we will move on to agenda item number 2, which is public comments on items not on the agenda. Moderator, are there any members of the public logged on?
This is the moderator. There are no members of the public logged on to the WebEx meeting. May we check the in-person locations if there are any public present?
This is Dr. Thompson. There are no members of the public present at my location.
Can I have the board members, when you guys give your public members, would you please give us your location as well?
Sure. This is Dr. Dara Thompson. I'm at 1330 Lincoln Avenue, Suite 304 in San Rafael, California, and there are no members of the public present.
This is Andy Yam and Dr. Davidson is also present. We are at Monterey Park Bergmeyer Library in the city of Monterey Park, and there are no members of the public present.
This is Dr. Mina Yoon. I'm at 919 Irving Street, San Francisco on Suite 104. There are no members of the public present.
This is Dr. Singleton and Dr. DeParshi. We're at 1043 Stewart Street, Suite 210, and there are no members of the public present in Lafayette.
This is Satara Tice at Fresno Holistic Medicine in Fresno, California, and there's no public members here.
Great, thank you. Do we have any public members, public that have signed on to WebEx?
Yes, this is the moderator. We do have one person, so at this time I'll go ahead and open up public comment for items not on the agenda. Members of the public on WebEx, if you would like to make a comment on this item, you can either raise your hand or click that Q&A icon down at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. All right, and it looks like we do have a request from Meredith. Meredith, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
I'm sorry I didn't write down my full name. This is Dr. Meredith Bull. I am part of the legislative committee for the CNDA, and I'm here representing us today. We've been following the actions of the Board of Pharmacy very closely in regard to the regulatory changes that they're making around sterile compounding and 503B Category 1 substances. I mean, aside from the negative impact this will have on many of our patients, we feel there might be a bit of scope infringement happening because some of those Category 1 substances, in particular glutathione, which was talked about extensively in those pharmacy board meetings, are explicitly listed in our scope of practice. I saw it mentioned in BPC 3640.7 and 0.8. And the Board of Pharmacy does not regulate us, yet they seemingly are with these actions. And so we, the CNDA, just wanted to raise that as a concern and really question, can they do this? So that's all I have to say.
Rebecca, do you want to speak to that at all? I know you've been in communication with the Board of Pharmacy about this issue.
No, we'll go ahead and take the comment and we can put it on a future agenda item if you'd like to do that. Thank you so much, Dr. Bull. I appreciate you giving the public comment.
Right, this is the moderator. It appears there are no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you.
And I just wanted to let you guys know that there are no public members in the El Dorado room.
Thank you. So at this time, we will move on to agenda item number 3, which is the review and possible approval of the October 4th, 2024 board meeting minutes.
Dr. Thompson, since we have a few presenters, can we go ahead and go to agenda item 7, please? Department of Consumer Affairs updates.
Yes, we don't want to keep you all waiting. So we are moving on to agenda item number 7, discussion and possible action on the Department of Consumer Affairs updates. And I will turn it over to our presenters.
All righty. Hello and good morning. Can you hear me?
This is the moderator. Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. Good morning, President Dr. Thompson, Vice President Yoon, Executive Officer Mitchell, and members of the board. Happy New Year. I'm Melissa Geer, Deputy Director for Board and Bureau Relations. I appreciate the opportunity to share the Department of Consumer Affairs update this morning. Before I begin, I'd like to thank you for your continued service on the board of Naturopathic Medicine and your patience as we look for candidates to fill your board vacancies. The governor is diligently working to fill the vacancies, and Rebecca has been a great advocate. If you know individuals who would be good board members, encourage them to apply on the governor's website, gov.ca.gov, and let Rebecca know. I can flag the application with the governor's appointment team, which may help to expedite the process. So with that, I will go ahead and start with my updates. First one being Governor's 2025-26 proposed state budget. Governor Newsom released his proposed 2025-26 state budget on January 10th, which included 8 budget change proposals, or BCPs, for DCA's boards and bureaus. Additionally, the Department of Finance approved DCA's vacancy reduction and government efficiency plans, which may be made official and during the spring revisions. The governor remains committed to funding resources to address California's housing and homelessness crisis. Included in the governor's proposed budget is the creation of a dedicated California Housing and Homeless Agency. The Department of Consumer Affairs and other regulators currently under the Business and Consumer Services and Housing Agency would form a consumer protection agency. This is an extraordinary opportunity for DCA to better align with other consumer protection entities as one consumer protection agency. With a Consumer Protection Agency Secretary within the Governor's Cabinet, this is an exciting opportunity that will only strengthen our mission, momentum, and delivery of services to California. The Governor's reorganization proposal will be reviewed by the nonpartisan Little Hoover Commission and the legislature in the spring. As more information is available, DCA will continue to keep board leadership updated. Next, Form 700 filing changes effective January 1st, 2025. The Governor signed AB 1170, which requires board members to now file their Form 700s electronically with the Fair Political Practice Commission, or FPPC, using their electronic filing system. Effective January 1st, 2025, DCA board members must file Form 700s through the FPPC's online system. Filings will no longer be filed via the NetFile portal DCA members have used for many years. Additionally, paper filings will not be accepted. The FPPC emailed all board members on January 2nd, 2025, with a link to the FPPC portal and login information. As a reminder, the annual Form 700 filing deadline is Tuesday, April 1st, 2025. Please contact Board and Bureau Relations with questions regarding the new requirements at memberrelations@dca.ca.gov. President's Training, February 19th, 2025. DCA invites presidents and vice presidents to attend our annual President's Training on February 19th from 10 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. This virtual training is for board members who are new to the role of president or vice president and those who have served in the role for a year or more. The training will review the role of a board president, communication best practices with the executive officer and board members, as well as the president's administrative duties. It also, it also includes a panel of prior board members who will share their knowledge and expertise and answer questions from attendees. Learning from each other is a large part of the training, and we look forward to seeing all presidents and vice presidents there. Please register online using DCA's Learning Management System, or LMS. Update on the Board and Bureau Relations team. Finally, I wanted to provide an update regarding DCA's Board and Bureau Relations team. Yvonne Durantes served as the Assistant Deputy Director of Board and Bureau Relations since October of 2022. On December 6th, the Governor appointed Yvonne as the Assistant Deputy Director of Legislative and Government Affairs at the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services. Yvonne's last day at DCA was December 31st. We appreciate Yvonne's dedication to the Board and Bureau Relations team and wish her well in her new role. And finally, as I close, on behalf of the Director, I would like to thank the Board and staff for their hard work and partnership last year. We are excited about 2025 and the many opportunities that await us. Thank you for your dedicated service that protects California's consumers every day. I appreciate your time this morning and welcome any questions from the board.
I have a question. Is the training on February 19th, will that be recorded or available on a later date?
No, we may record it, but in the past we have not necessarily shared that recording, but it is a virtual training and we only offer it once a year.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And just to clarify, this is Dr. Singleton, is the training specifically for president and vice president and mandatory, or is it for all board members and mandatory?
The training is specifically geared for presidents and vice presidents. It is not mandatory, but highly recommended.
you so much for that update. If there are no other questions from the board members, we could move on to the next presenter. All right, I'm not seeing any other question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm the next presenter. I was gonna ask if everyone can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Matthew Wainwright. I'm a legislative manager with the Department of Consumer Affairs Division of Legislative Affairs. I've been invited to speak with you today about the 2025 legislative calendar, as well as an overview of the sunset review process. First, onto the legislative calendar. I provided a copy of this year's 2025 tentative legislative calendar with Rebecca, and I believe it's in your meeting materials.
It's under tab 12, if you guys wanted to take a look at that. It would be agenda item attachment 12A.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. There are a lot of dates on here. I'll go over a couple important dates, but before I do want to point out that this is called a tentative legislative calendar. For those of you that have interacted with the legislature in any capacity, I'm sure you know that everything is tentative. The legislature has discretion on many of these deadlines, and they can change for individual bills or generally at their whim. So they like to put that tentative there as a bit of a disclaimer, and I wanted to, before going over important dates, just state that any of these are subject to, many of these are subject to change. But some important dates to keep an eye out for 2025. February 21st is the last day for bills to be introduced. This is often referred to as the introduction deadline. May 2nd is the last day for policy committees to hear fiscal bills introduced in their House and report them to fiscal committees. It's worth noting that May 9th is the deadline for non-fiscal bills to be heard by policy committees and reported to the floor. May 23rd is the last day for fiscal committees to hear and report bills introduced in their House to the floor. And June 6th is the House of Origin deadline, which is the last day for each House to pass bills introduced in that House. It's worth noting that June 15th is the budget bill deadline, where the budget bill must be passed by midnight. The legislature then is scheduled for summer recess between July 18th and August 18th, when they will reconvene. September 5th is the last day to amend bills on the floor, and September 12th is the last day for each House to pass bills. It's worth noting that that means that October 12th is the last day for the governor to sign or veto bills passed by the legislature on or before September 12th and in the governor's possession after September 12th. Moving on to sunset review. Much like the legislative calendar, before I get into this, I want to put out a disclaimer that this is tentative. This is a broad overview of the sunset process and should serve as a general guide. These are not hard and fast rules because, much like the legislative calendar, this process is run by the legislature, and they tweak it frequently and can change it at any time. A bit of an overview. The California legislature conducts an ongoing evaluation and review of nearly all the regulatory boards, bureaus, committees, and commissions under the Department of Consumer Affairs, which is referred to as the Sunset Review. The purpose of Sunset Review is to determine which boards or bureaus should be sunset, i.e. abolished, and which ones should be kept, and what reforms to make to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of that board or bureau. It is very rare for a board or bureau to be sunset. Typically, a board will get a 4-year sunset date extension. However, for those boards that have notable issues, the legislature may only grant a shorter extension. That could be 3 years, 2 years, or 1 year. The sunset review process begins approximately 2 years prior to the sunset date for each board. In the spring, summer of the first year of the process, which is where I believe your board is currently, The legislative staff sends the board template sunset reports out to those boards to be completed and returned to legislative staff, usually by December or early January. And again, worth noting that this is subject to change. Board sunset reports must be approved by the board prior to their submission to the legislature. And although the department does not play an active role in writing and approving sunset reports from boards, we are available as a resource to provide technical assistance. The following step is background papers. So once the reports are provided to the legislative committees, the legislative staff will review the reports and develop their own background papers, which identify significant policy and operational issues with the boards up for sunset. Legislative staff may also request follow-up meetings to discuss specific issues that it has identified. And the background paper is released usually a few days prior to the sunset review hearings, which are typically held in March of the second year of the process. We say usually because that window has fluctuated somewhat in recent years. So we want to make sure to give that disclaimer that it could be a few days, it could be a day, and that's just worth noting prior to that scheduled hearing in approximately March. The hearing itself, they're typically held in March, as I said, jointly by the Senate and Assembly Business and Professions Committees. Specifically, the Assembly Business and Professions Committee and the Senate Business Professions and Economic Development Committee convene jointly. Depending on the board or bureau undergoing review, additional members, such as those in health or education committees, may participate in the sunset review hearing. There are usually 2 sunset review hearings to cover all of the boards being reviewed in a given year. So they usually schedule all of the boards back to back over 2 days of hearings. Generally, they've been pretty good about that over recent years. That is, again, like everything else I'm telling you about, subject to change. At this hearing, the board's chair and executive officer, or board president and executive officer, provide an opening statement and testimony addressing specific issues that were identified in the sunset report and background paper as requested by legislative staff, as well as answer any questions that legislators have at that hearing. Additional board members and staff can participate in this hearing. They can participate in this hearing, and this can include enforcement managers with specific expertise and experience on a given issue, usually raised in the background paper. Committee staff may provide a draft copy of the background paper to board staff prior to its public release in order to confirm factual details, but it isn't a guarantee that they will do that in every instance. It is a possibility. It's worth noting that 30 days after a board sunset review hearing, each board or bureau is required to respond in writing to all of the issues identified in the background paper. Finally, the legislative aspect of this itself. The legislative committees typically carry the legislation extending sunset dates for DCA boards and bureaus. Through the second year of the process, after the hearing, amendments are made to the sunset extension bills to include statutory changes addressing issues that were identified in the background paper and sunset report, or issues raised by the licensing program stakeholders or the administration. In recent years, these bills have usually been introduced in the instances of the Senate, they've been authored by the chair of the Senate Committee on Business Professions and Economic Development, and in the Assembly, it has been, for the beginning of the legislative calendar, it has been carried by the Committee of Business Professions itself. And then sometime in second house, they will then insert the chair of the committee, Assembly Committee of Business and Professions. It's worth noting, like everything else, that is subject to change, but that is how they have presented these bills in previous years. That concludes my update on sunset review and the 2025 legislative calendar, and I'm happy to do my best to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Do any members have any questions? I don't see any. Are there any public comments in any of the sites? Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. I appreciate you being here today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for those presentations. Do we have any other presenters for this agenda item 7 present?
Yes, we do. We have the budget office update.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Of course, I believe Ms. Kirsten Cox is here for that.
Hi, good morning. Okay. All right, good morning. My name is Kirsten Cox, and I am the budget analyst for the DCA Budget Office, and I am joined by the budget manager, Harmony DeFilippo. I wanted to thank the board, excuse me, and the executive staff for allowing me a few minutes to present on agenda item 7C, the board's expenditure projections and fund condition statement. First, I'm going to start with the board's expenditures, attachment 7C, page 1 of your materials. These projections are based on actual data through fiscal month 5. This report includes 23-24 actual expenditures in green, as well as 24-25 budgeted and projected expenditures in blue and orange. As we move to the end of the document, you will see the board had a beginning base budget of $763,000 and is projected to spend around $734,000, creating a reversion to the board's fund of approximately $29,000, a reversion percentage of 3.86%. The next document I will be going over is the board's revenue projections, attachment 7C, page 2 of your materials. This report includes receipts collected through November and projected revenue to year end. I will go further into these projections as we transition into the next slide. The next document is attachment 7C, page 3 of your materials. This is the board's fund condition statement. As a reminder, we read this document from top to bottom, left to right. The left column is the board's prior year 23-24 actuals. It shows the board began 23-24 with a beginning base balance of $895,000, collected $622,000 in revenues, with $90,000 from initial license fees, $486,000 from license renewals, and $46,000 was collected from the issuance of citations, fines, delinquent fees, and other revenue. The board expended $689,000, which includes $29,000 in direct draws to the fund for statewide pro rata and pension payments. The board ended 23-24 with $828 million reserve balance, or about $828,000, reserve balance, or about 13.0 months in reserve. For current year 24-25, the board projects revenue of $550,000, with $89,000 projected from initial license fees, $436,000 from renewal fees, and $25,000 from the issuance of citations, fines, delinquent fees, and other revenue. The board's 24-25 expenditures are based on governor's budget with FM5 projections at $765,000 between authorized expenditures and direct draws to the fund, leaving the board with a fund balance of approximately $613,000 or 10 months in reserve. The budget office will continue to monitor the board's revenue and expenditures and report back to the board with monthly expenditure projections as we continue to close fiscal months in the current fiscal year. A few things to note of the board's fund condition. The fund condition is a snapshot in time. One of the main factors driving expenditure increases in future years is a result of personal service adjustments. These include general salary increases as well as employee compensation and retirement rate adjustments. The budget office includes a conservative ongoing 3% increase to expenditures on the fund condition statement to account for these ongoing incremental adjustments. You will also notice revenue is projected static in the out years. Lastly, I would like to note to the board that any future legislation or unanticipated events could result in the board's need for additional resources, which could create cost pressure on the fund. The budget office will continue to monitor the board's fund condition statement and keep the line of communication with the board's executive staff open for any future needs or expectations. Again, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to present today at the meeting, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Do any of the board members have any questions for the budget office? Public comment? Oh, yes.
This is Christy Shields, Regulations Counsel for the board. So the fund condition reports, does that, I mean, I don't know if it could at this point, account for the most recent fee increases that were adopted by the board effective January 1st, 2025?
Hi, this is Harmony. So the current fund condition does, I do not believe that this includes the current fee increase, and that will be updated. Once approved, then we can add that to the fund condition for future board meetings so that you have the visibility of what that incremental difference will be for those specific categories.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen, for being here. We really appreciate your time and effort.
Of course,
Is
thank you.
anyone else getting an echo?
This is the moderator. It seems like it might be coming from the El Dorado room. I'm not sure if they're able to separate the speaker from their microphone or turn down the volume of the speaker.
Maybe that one is probably too. Well, then I think it needs all of them. We'll just leave it over there. Is that better?
Let me check. Mic check, mic check, mic check. I'm not hearing myself, so I think we're good.
Perfect. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. So, Kristen, we appreciate your time. I don't see any other questions at this time. Oh, now I'm getting an echo again. So do we have any other presenters, Rebecca, for agenda item 7?
Yes, we do. We have the Human Resource Office to do the evaluation, EO evaluation process overview.
Wonderful.
I believe.
Thank you for being here.
You're cutting off. That's from the DCA Personnel Office.
Afternoon. Oh, there we go. Catherine, go ahead. I'll leave it to you. We cannot hear you, Catherine. We cannot hear you. Oh, okay. I'll go ahead and let Catherine work on the audio. Good afternoon, Greetings Chair Thompson and board members. My name is Stephanie Louie. I am with the California Department of, sorry about that. The Department of Consumer Affairs, Office of Human Resources. I am speaking on behalf right now of Appointment and Recruitment Specialist Catherine Chillier. I understand that the board will be holding its annual performance appraisal for the Executive Officer Rebecca Mitchell at the May 14th, 2024 board meeting. In preparation for this, today I'll be presenting on the Executive Officer evaluation process. I also wanted to take the opportunity to go over the process for requesting a salary increase, as oftentimes these two topics correlate. In the meeting materials, I would like to direct you to items labeled 7D1, which I believe is currently showing, as well as 7D2. These flow charts outline the process and the steps I will be going over today. The executive officer evaluation process is an opportunity for the board to assess the executive officer's performance over the past year and to set expectations for the upcoming year. Evaluations become a part of the executive officer's official personnel file and is an attachment to the salary increase request if one is pursued by the board. Today's presentation is a high-level overview, so please note that approximately 1 month prior to the May board meeting, Catherine or I, or a designee, will send detailed instructions and relevant documents to all board members outlining roles and responsibilities. The appraisal form contains 4 performance factors. These 4 factors contain sub-factors. You will be responsible to independently assess the board's executive officer and prepare to discuss as a group factors 1 through 4 during the May board meeting in closed session. The appraisal form also has a section that captures commentary from DCA's executive leaders on key points required of an executive officer. The DCA executive leader commentary will be shared with all board members at the May board meeting during closed session. The board chair is responsible for consolidating all board member comments into one final performance appraisal form. And once the performance appraisal form is finalized, the board chair meets separately with the executive officer Mitchell to discuss the performance and the board's input. Do you have any questions before I move on to the salary increase request process? All right. And Catherine, do we have audio up yet? Just want to double check.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Do you want to take on the salary increase?
I sure can.
Thank you.
Okay. As mentioned earlier, I want to provide information on how the board can go about requesting a salary increase for the board's executive officer if the executive officer is not at the maximum salary of the position's salary range. The board can recommend a salary increase, typically an amount that does not exceed 5%, nor an amount that is above the maximum salary range. If the board is in agreement to seek a salary increase, this will require a motion and a board vote. In addition, the board will need to agree on a proposed salary increase amount. If a salary increase is pursued, a justification must be submitted by the board chair. The justification should capture the executive officer's exemplary work performance and the following, if applicable: accomplishments, any changes to the position, retention or recruitment challenges, past adjustments provided, including a general salary increase, pay equity with similarly situated positions, position sensitivity or scope, program growth in the areas of licensee population or new license types, staffing, budget, changes in programmatic complexity and or operational changes, legislative-driven change that can increase the level of complexity and sensitivity of work, licensing and enforcement performance measures, any contributions department-wise or nationally. Please note that the salary increase request is sent to the California Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency for review and approval. After a copy is sent to the governor's office, in addition, it is sent to the California Department of Human Resources, also known as CalHR. CalHR has the authority to approve, modify, and deny salary requests for executive officers. That will conclude my overview of the process, and as I mentioned earlier, more detailed instructions will be sent to all board members 1 month prior to the meeting, with a reminder 1 week before. Do we have any questions?
Thank you so much for that overview. How do we know what the max salary for our executive officer is?
Oh, okay. I will be providing that information to the board chair, and the information will be shared with board members during closed session.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Moderator, are there any members of the public online?
This is the moderator. There are no members of the public on the WebEx call.
And board members, have any members of the public joined you at your public locations?
This is Dr. Singleton. No, no one has joined.
This is Bruce Davidson with Andy Yam. No members of the public have joined us.
This is Dr. Mina Yoon. There are no members here.
This is Dr. Tice, and there are no members of the public here.
Wonderful. It does look like Dr. Davidson has a question.
I'm sorry, I had put my hand up only because I just wanted to check in. I had trouble joining the WebEx, so I joined late. I just wanted to make sure that I was marked present. I've been on since about 10:45.
We got you. Thank you so much, Dr. Davidson.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I apologize for my tardiness.
No worries. Thank you. And there are no public members in the El Dorado room.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Catherine and Stephanie, for that update. We look forward to reviewing our executive officer. And I think that concludes agenda item 7. Do we need to call for public comment since there are no members of the public present?
There's no one online.
There's nobody online, no.
This is Yu Ping Lin, Board Counsel. If there's no members of the public at any of the sites or online, we can move on to the next agenda item.
Wonderful. Well, we had moved forward to agenda item 7 in order to accommodate our presenters. Do we have any other agenda items for which we have presenters present that we need to bump forward, Rebecca?
No, not for any of those. We do have our regulations counsel here, and she'll be here for the regulatory things that we have on our agenda today. But it might be a good time to go ahead and take that 15-minute bio break.
Well, we only started at 10:30, so I was thinking we would do that closer to like 11:45, so it's midway between the start and lunch.
Perfect. Sounds good.
We're still on item 8.
I'm sorry, did somebody say something?
No, that's fine. We can do that. And then we would probably want to go ahead and go to agenda item 8.
Okay, great. So we're moving on to agenda item 8. This does segue nicely since we just talked about the budget, which is discussion and consideration of possible options to address the fiscal issues in the Naturopathic Doctors Fund. I think all of the board members are familiar with this. Rebecca, do you want to address this item?
So this item was asked to be put onto the agenda. I believe Dr. Davidson and I believe Mr. Andy Yam had asked to have this on here just to discuss maybe some ways that we could address the fund condition, the issues with the fund condition. So if you guys wanted to discuss this, now is the time to do so. I can tell you that our fee increase was effective on January 1st. So we are collecting additional fees now for the renewals, for the application fees, and then the initial license fees. Those were not provided in the budget items that you got today, but we will have those for you. So I'll have them redo those and we'll get those out for you with those new numbers. But it would be a good time if you had any other questions or wanted to discuss ways that you can bring in more revenue.
Dr. Davidson?
Thank you. So I'm sorry, do I understand then from the comments that were just made that the fee change effective January 1st is projected to have a material impact on this issue?
It should have some impact on those numbers that were provided to you today, yes.
So
Okay,
this is Christy Shields, Regulation Counsel for the board. If you recall, when we were at our last meeting, and actually the first meeting where this item was discussed, I think in March of last year, we had extensive discussions about the fact that the regulatory increases that we were going to be proposing would not address the long-term fiscal issues for the board, and that other things like legislation would need to be explored perhaps during sunset review to increase the caps, but also potentially what you were talking about, scope of practice issues that may allow or encourage more people to join the profession, because the population isn't appearing to be as robust as it needs to be to support the long-term longevity of the board. And so I don't know if you want to pick up those discussions. We really hadn't agendized that issue for you to discuss more fully. So this would be the time for you to continue those discussions that we began in March of last year.
Go ahead, Dr. Davidson.
Thank you. Yeah, so I guess based upon your comment just now, it would seem that those two avenues are not mutually exclusive by any means. You know, the one avenue has to do with legislative changes to raise the cap so that higher fees can be charged for the current population of licensees. And the other avenue has to do with trying to adjust the scope of practice to attract more potential licensees in. I don't think we would want to rely on one or the other. It seems as though both of those are necessary to me.
So I don't know, this is Christy Shields again. I don't know if they're, go ahead.
I was going to say, to me, both of those avenues appear necessary to pursue.
This is Dr. Thompson, and I would agree with you, Bruce. Although I would say that were the scope of practice expanded and a large number of new licensees were to come into the state, the need for fee increases would likely become much less. However, I think the issue we're dealing with our current fee increase and the consideration of future fee increases is there's kind of a time lag with all of that. And we don't want to become insolvent in the process, right? So our current fee increase is going to extend the period of time that we are functional in order for us to work on the issues at hand such that, you know, we don't become insolvent while we're trying to correct the larger issues, if I understand correctly.
That's correct.
Dr. Yoon?
Are there any other questions?
Dr. Yoon has had her hand up for a while, and then Dr. Singleton just put her hand up.
As I recall, there are some other boards that do take fees for continuing education. I don't recall, I remember, Rebecca, that you had mentioned that that's something that we do not want to do. Is that correct?
We just don't have the staffing resources to go over and approve and review CE. It's just, we would need another staff member. We just, if we don't have the money, we just wouldn't have the money to bring in new staff.
Okay. And then just a idea or comment. One of the things that the acupuncture board does do now is implement a wall license. And it is something that we have to have at our place of business. It's an additional $50, but I think it's also something that is actually nice to have, something that people can come in and see that you're actually a licensed acupuncturist. And I know, yes, we, as a naturopathic doctor, we have our license that we, have to present, but it's kind of not wall appropriate or it's not very noticeable. So that might be some idea, but it's still going to go back to the licensees, which is more fees.
So, Dr. Yoon, currently when a new licensee becomes licensed or an applicant becomes licensed, we send out a large wall certificate, which looks similar to a diploma. And then there is also a small wall certificate, and this needs to be actually placed in a area that is that can be seen by all of the patients. And then you have your wallet pocket ID. So those three things are sent out when anybody is licensed. And then when you renew the small wall certificate and the pocket ID should be sent out to you. And if you don't have that, please let me know so that I can get that to you. But those should be going out every time a renewal is done.
Okay, thank you. I probably have to double check that then. But I do know for the acupuncture, I know for the acupuncture, it's a separate fee.
Ah, gotcha. We'll have to look into that.
Thank you.
Of course.
This is Dr.
Singleton, did you have your hand?
Sure, I do. Yeah. So I have two questions. The first is, are there, because I'm a little bit at a loss of like brainstorming legitimate and potentially legal sources of us generating some additional funding. So are there other examples from other boards that we could sort of pick from or use as an example or a template? That's my first question.
So I have brought this up in the past of maybe bringing on a fictitious name. We would have to request that maybe when we go to sunset. I know that this has been something that we've talked about in the past. When I was with the osteopathic board, and I know the medical board also has fictitious name permits, and that is an application that they would need to submit to the board, and then the board would make sure that that name is not already being used or that another name similar is not being used. They would approve it, and then that fictitious name is issued. Now, we do have some authority in our statute on those corporate names, but we don't have anything that really talks to fictitious names, so it would have to be a statutory change. So it may be something you guys want to bring up again this time in sunset. But that is an application fee, and then it is a yearly renewal, an annual renewal.
Office asked for counsel this, but this is Christy Shields again, Regulations Counsel. We don't charge, or you don't charge a fee for IV therapy administration, registration, or permit, right? So dental board, for instance, they have the general license for dentists, but then if they want to do anesthesia or conscious sedation, they actually have to apply and pay for a permit to perform that specialty within their practice. So they have to pay an additional fee to perform that specialty service and have specialized training, experience, equipment, and there's a whole permit application process for that. So since you have this additional, and then, there's a question whether you want to even go in that direction, but if you have this additional specialty training you have to perform the IV therapy administration, and the board has to somehow recognize that publicly, a way to do that would be to have a permit process with a fee attached so that people can go online and see that they are authorized to do IV therapy administration and they have the permit for it. So that's something to consider, specialties within your general licensure. There's advantages and disadvantages to that, and you may have policy objections to doing that, but that is something I've seen other healing arts boards do when the particular practice involves other additional specialized training and risk really to public health, because you want them to have that additional indicia, if you will, of licensure, that they met certain minimum standards to perform that service under their general license. So I don't know, that would be something to think about, because you do have additional workload for reviewing those qualifications that you aren't currently recovering within your budget, that staff are spending time to do and you're not charging for. So look at those kinds of things within your Practice Act and see if there would be some interest in doing that. So it's something that occurred to me when we were going over the IV therapy administration regulations, that you don't recover a fee for that service you perform in reviewing those qualifications.
And I believe at this time, that would be the only sort of additional permitting that we could issue. I mean, that's the only additional specialty. It's not like we have minor surgery. We don't, I don't, to my knowledge, we don't have anything else that we could potentially permit. And then
the only other thing is we have, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
I was just going to say the only other thing that we have is the drug furnishing number. So we have to, when an applicant applies, we have to make sure that they meet qualifications that they can prescribe. So that would be another thing, is the drug furnishing number. Right now we do that, and we don't, charge for that as well. So those are a couple things that we do have, a workload that we're not collecting money for.
So,
Dr. Thompson, I'm sorry.
And I'll just finish this up. My concern is with starting to pull out these individual fees. Is the potential revenue source from that going to be enough to offset future raises, or are we going to, potentially charge for these new categories and then still have to raise the fees? We don't have any potential projections on what that would be to even, consider if it's a viable option.
Yeah, we would have to actually do a workload study on that and actually see what those numbers would look like. And we could bring that back to you just with some kind of high level numbers, because we know how many NDFs or drug furnishing numbers we have issued right now. We also know how many IV certs we have issued right now. So we could actually very easily get those, get that information for you. If there was a scope modernization, if you will, and the minor office procedures was added, that may also be something, because that is going to be an additional resource that staff needs to provide in order to make sure that the applicant meets those qualifications to do the minor office procedure. So those are a couple of other things that if we did look into a scope modernization, or if the legislature had given that to us, it may be something that we could collect additional fees for.
To add on to that, Rebecca, this is Dr. Thompson. One of the things that we wanted to do with the sunset was look at changing some of the criteria around our continuing education to allow us to change the continuing education requirements and potentially require recertification for some of these things. So if we did add a fee, and then those had to be recertified every 4 to 6 years, whatever the renewal cycle was, then that would be something that we could look at. I would say that my concern about all of that, certainly we need to stay solvent, and the naturopathic doctors in California do not want the board to go away and to be unlicensed, even if it costs them more. But I am concerned that the big part of our issue being the restrictive scope and people not wanting to practice in California because of that. And then if we then make the fees incredibly high and the scope is not expanding, it makes it an even less, and it's also a very expensive place to live. It makes it an even less appealing place to practice. And I think we end up in the same situation where we just are not going to have the licensees to be sustainable. So we have to look at, in the long term, I think the scope needs to change in order for the profession to function in the state.
So can I ask the executive officer if she's aware of other naturopathic medical boards in other states that have a more robust scope or licensing population? Do you have any examples you can draw from?
Absolutely. So Arizona, Washington, Oregon, all three of those have a very robust scope of practice. They all allow independent prescribing rights. They all have minor office procedures or minor office surgery, depending on which state you're looking at. So those three right there. And then in a lot of those states, they're actually able to provide orders to RNs, which is, it allows them to have a more robust practice when they have the ability to provide orders and direction to registered nurses. So, you know, and I, being on the federation, I can also get every single scope of practice for every licensing board for naturopathic medicine across the United States and in Canada. Not that Canada really matters, but it really gives a feel for what naturopathic doctors do, you know, and then in every other state except California, they're also known as naturopathic physicians. I don't want to go on that thing here in California, but it just does show that, you know, everywhere else they are seen as a much greater provider than they are here in California. And so it is a little bit sad to see that we're just really behind the curve here. But I can definitely get that for you if you guys are interested in that.
I think you're probably going to need that for Sunset if that's something you're interested in exploring. So I know that we've done everything you can possibly do from a regulatory perspective, so it's going to need to go to other avenues, I believe.
This is Dr. Singleton. I think that having scope modernization, you know, according to what Dr. Thompson said, it really does put our board at risk because we can't continue to raise fees and not expand the scope. You know, from a practitioner standpoint, it just doesn't make sense. So,
Andy, do you have a comment?
I do. Did you call me? Is that say Andy?
Yes, I did.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to I mean, before you had spoken, Dr. Thompson, that was exactly what I wanted to add. You know, I on one hand, you know, understand, I think the need for, you know, fiscal solvency, like in the short term, but I guess like the question, I guess for me is like, if we're raising fees, right, and again, I know that people want to stay in practice in California, it doesn't solve sort of the question of like, well, we're raising the fees, and then inevitably some folks feel that, well, this fee is now too much, therefore I either will, you know, then the cost or choice to move becomes more attractive, and then we lose licensee population, then we have to then in turn increase more fees. And so, I mean, I think that inevitably, I think that while the conversation is great on some of these other fees, I think it's really just the modernization question. And so then that leads me to my question though, because I feel like, and this is just for clarification, I feel like we've kind of gone, like my understanding is that, like, you know, it's not the position or the directive of the board to be doing the modernization strictly as in providing the language, or because apparently that would be like CNDA's prerogative. So I'm just wondering what we're able to do, and it was mentioned like that's during the sunset review, like are we able to suggest changes to code, which would essentially be a bill, right? Or how does that process work, given that where we are and what we would need to, I guess maybe the decorum for us to be part of that conversation? What does that look like?
Andy,
So,
this
Andy,
is
I
Dr.
can.
Thompson. Oh, well,
No,
I
go
think,
ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, I think Rebecca and I are probably going to say the same thing, which is, yes, that's true. However, we're in a very unique position as a board in that our original license was only written about 20 years ago, and there was an understanding that it would be modernized after a trial period, and it never has been. So there's an issue, and Christy, I'm sure you can speak to this as well, where we haven't actually, as a board, we haven't actually done this thing that we were supposed to have already done. And it keeps getting blocked without the understanding or sort of acknowledgement of this sort of dangling issue with our original licensure that hasn't been addressed yet. Rebecca, you can add to that if you'd like.
Sure. And actually, I was going to say the same thing. So yes, that is a big thing, is that there was an advisory council that was supposed to provide information back to the legislature on the training and education of naturopathic doctors and whether they had the adequate training to prescribe independently and to do these minor office procedures. And if so, what types of office procedures and what types of medications should they be allowed to use. So this was done once in 2007. It was done again in 2015. However, the legislature never took any action on it. So we are still at the exact same place that we were, and just nothing has ever come from this. So I think I want to say the landscape was a little different back then. I think that right now, if we brought this back to the legislature again, this time in sunset, and said, you know, here's what was supposed to happen, we've established this, here's our advisory committee's, you know, report, and maybe they can take that and actually do what they were supposed to back in 2007, and again in 2015. Don't know if they will, but it is something that we can definitely try. However, with sunset bills, they don't like to do things that are very contentious, because if the bill doesn't pass, we're sunsetted. So you don't want to put things in there that somebody's going to come and oppose. So this would be something that if we really wanted to do this, we bring it up as an issue so that the legislature knows it's an issue of ours or a challenge of the board, and then maybe at a later time or with working with whoever, we can get a bill sponsored outside of that sunset bill, but at least state the issue in sunset so the legislature is aware. And that would be my recommendation.
And thank you so much.
From historical perspective, at the department, I would agree with that assessment, and typically the boards do not put forth scope of practice changes. It's something the associations usually promote. I mean, there is an argument that there is a consumer protection aspect in that you know, we don't have enough healthcare providers in California, and therefore, you know, and having more providers that can do more services would increase availability. So there is that aspect, but traditionally, to avoid the issues Ms. Mitchell's mentioned in sunset, we usually don't put anything that we think that an association, I think you know who might object to scope increases, particularly when it deals with prescribing, might occur and affect your ability to continue in existence. So we might want to make sure that, you know, like you said, mention it, provide the papers, background papers that were developed to support scope modernization, raise it as an issue and an issue that affects the viability of the continued regulation of the profession and the ability of the board to continue as well. And then, you know, see whether there's check the temperature, so to speak, in that process and see if there's interest in the legislature, and then hopefully the associations, you know, will chime in and support that. But the other issues that we discussed certainly are, I think, permitting and changing the, the cap increases are definitely things that the boards traditionally request and sunset legislatively.
Thank you, Christy. I really appreciate your input on this. And I just want to say one thing, and then I think Dr. Tice is next, which is I think it is important to keep bringing it up. And just see, just to make sure the awareness is there. And like Rebecca said, it's sort of like switching us from a committee to a board during our last sunset. All of a sudden people said, this is so weird. Why are you a committee? And it just happened, and so there may just be a different set of ears. And so but it is such a significant issue for us as a profession. I do think it needs to be continually in the conversation. Dr. Tice? Satira, did you have a question, or did it get answered?
Yes, I'm sorry about that. So what I wanted to address on the flip side of the budget deficit, we're kind of talking about like fundraising and bringing in more money. But on the flip side of this is looking at costs that we could potentially reduce. And what I keep thinking about is how much it costs to regulate unlicensed practitioners or lay people in California, and how expensive that is for us. And I know you've mentioned this before in the past, but I wanted to just bring this up again as a possible idea of if there was some sort of streamlined process when people put a complaint, they could submit the complaint online, but then that whole file would be transferred to the California Medical Board, where we say, hey, look, they're practicing medicine without a license, and kind of push that over onto them. And I know they're going to say, no, we don't want to take that. But that to me means that they need us here to regulate this unlicensed practice and to keep consumers safe, and that we should be able to use that as leverage for scope expansion, that we're needed to be doing this, or like, let's work together so that it's not such an expensive part of our budget.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I'll be giving you some data on the enforcement later on. But the unlicensed population of enforcement cases has went up a little bit this time around. So we're like at 75% of our enforcement cases right now are unlicensed. So it is a huge issue for us, and that has been a big issue for almost the whole time that we've been in existence. But that is definitely an issue to place into the sunset.
Yes, that's an excellent point. Dr. Yoon, did you have something else to say?
Yes, thank you. I agree, definitely scope is a big issue. The other thing that I was kind of thinking, or there's two things that I was thinking about. One is that especially with the pandemic, there are a lot of licensees that went toward telemedicine and moved across state, or possibly are straddling both states, but are licensed possibly in just one state, which is probably the one that has a bigger scope of practice and a cheaper licensing fee, which would not be California. Is this something that is on our radar of maybe people who are practicing telemedicine and seeing Californians, but are in another state?
So this is on our radar. We have definitely seen a couple of practitioners who are in Oregon, straddle the line, and have thought about giving up their California license because of the cost and because of the limited scope and because they can do so much more in Oregon. So they actually have their patients, especially if they're just right on the border, they'll have their California patients go on up to Oregon. So it's an issue. They're actually taking patients from California up to Oregon because of this scope issue. And so we do, though, have it on the radar that if we do see a licensee that is not licensed here but has a license in Oregon and they're seeing patients here, we do go after them. And then if we go after them, then the state that they're licensed in will go after them usually as well. So we have seen that in the past. But we also have seen it vice versa, where you have a licensee here in California who is doing telemedicine and seeing people outside of California without a benefit of a license in that state, and we've actually taken action as well on that. So we do have that on our radar.
Okay. And then one other thing, I know continuing education, we talked about probably having to open the Practice Act to change a couple things for that. But if, for example, the board had a mandatory ethics class that we created, I think that would be something that would be that would be something that would be actually maybe contributing to a little bit more funding, but also something that's going to help the board and also be yeah, a good requirement, because I know that some other states do require the ethics.
Sure, we can look into that. I can tell you that in order to create some of these ethic courses and stuff, it takes quite a bit of funding to do so. So we'll take a look at that and see. I'll speak with some folks over at DCA and see what we can do about that, and some of the other boards that do have the ethics in their statute for CE. So we'll take a look and I'll bring that back to you during the next board meeting.
Thank you so much, Rebecca.
Thank you so much, Rebecca.
And just a quick, this is Dr. Thompson, just a quick reminder that we can't change our CE requirements at all right now, which is one of the things we're trying to work on in the sunset. Dr. Davidson.
Thank you. I wanted to try to build on the comment that Satara made, or the suggestion she made, or perhaps look at it from a slightly different angle. One of the things that struck me by when I was listening to what she was suggesting is the focus she had on the notion that that one of the reasons that the committee and the profession has had trouble expanding scope is because there are those who oppose that. And I think it's fair to observe that those are probably mostly from the side of the medical board and the MD profession as opposed to the ND profession. And it seemed as though Satara's comment or suggestion was helping us focus on that aspect of it. She, I think, was offering a suggestion to help us get some leverage in that direction. And I guess my thought along those lines has been also in this discussion has been that bringing it up over and over again, the need to expand the scope and the fact that other states have expanded scope compared to California, all of that, to bring it up over and over again to make sure it hasn't gone away so that people in the legislature are still aware of it is surely important. But at the same time, perhaps we also need to develop more of a positive relationship with the medical board so that they become our allies in that regard. And I think Satara's comment was along those lines, but even more expansively, whether there's a way to approach the members of the medical board so that they can become more actively allied with us in our perspective on this.
Bruce, I'd like to comment on that because I think it's a really, really important point. And when I first joined the board, we were doing a lot more outreach. A lot of that got squelched by the COVID pandemic and not wanting to physically see people in person. And I know that, and that's sort of a passion of Andy's, is like building bridges. And so I think it's really, really important. I want to point out that the medical board generally gets along pretty well with us. It's the California Medical Association that we tend to have more issues with as far as scope expansion, just as a clarification.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that clarification. So it's less the board and more the professional organization.
And that's a generalization, of course, and I'm sure there are, members of both that have issues, but I, myself and one of our former board members went and gave a presentation to the medical board, and it was quite well received, actually.
And that goes the same with the osteopathic medical board as well. We have very good working relationships with them when it comes to enforcement actions and issues.
So that's interesting. So then when reference was made earlier in the discussion to a concern with bringing this into the sunset package because there might be those who would oppose it and therefore would kill the reauthorization bill entirely. The quote unquote those who would oppose it, then that leads me to understand that those are likely to be people who are representing the professional organizations that come to their legislators in opposition. Is that a correct understanding?
That's a correct assessment, yes. As a matter of fact, during our last sunset, the medical board actually supported the renewal of our act. So.
The other group that I would say, there are always people who don't understand our education and training and have opposition based on that. So I think education is key. I feel like I'm frequently educating people even in my day-to-day life, and certainly as in my role on the board. But I would say that in my experience, Rebecca, and correct me if I'm wrong, the main opposition we've gotten has been from unlicensed naturopathic doctors and from the California Medical Association. Would you say that's true, or am I misremembering that?
That would be the majority of the opposition, yes.
That's interesting. Yeah, I guess I think this may be applicable, so I'll just mention it, and then that may be all that I can contribute to this discussion. But I recall, and it's been a couple of years since I saw this material, but there are examples of effective collaborative relationships between the MD world and the ND world that are institutionally based. I think I used to work at Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles, and I believe that for some time, and I haven't looked at it recently, so I don't know if it's still present, but there was an integrative medicine function that brought the professions together in a positive collaborative fashion. And I just wonder whether there may be some way of leveraging those kinds of initiatives success to communicate with the California Medical Association in a more positive light, I guess. I don't know. It's maybe a different angle to approach it. I don't know for sure, but it's just something that I thought I would comment on.
Thank you so
and
much.
I think we can definitely. Yeah, we can definitely take a look at this. I think maybe we should get back onto the topic of how we go about generating more revenue, and with that, scope modernization is one of the big things, and working with some of the other professions would definitely do that. So I think that all of these are some really great examples, and I've tried to capture as much as I could on this so we can go back on these when we start going into the sunset and bring these things back to our next agenda items as well for our next board meeting and go even more into depth on this.
I agree, Rebecca. This is Dr. Thompson. I think this would be a great thing to add and speak to in more detail at a future board meeting. I know that I I personally believe that, the majority of all healthcare providers really just want to care for our patients appropriately and have them be safe. And so if there's opposition, it's almost always coming from a place of misunderstanding. And so the more we can reach out and educate, the better. So I think this would be a great thing to talk about in more detail. I know we're past time on our break right now, so maybe we can add that for the May meeting. And I'm sorry, is our next meeting in May? When is our next meeting? I'm so sorry. So,
that would be, yeah, it would be May 14th.
Thank you so much for the May meeting. And then are there other comments, besides scope expansion, we could have a whole meeting about that and how it affects public safety, but any other comments on how to affect the long-term budget and what needs to happen there? And then when we finish this agenda item, we will go into a break for people who are wondering when that's going to happen.
Dr. Thompson, I just had my hand up and I just wanted to say that, was echoing your comments. It's great that you've been saying everything that's on my mind. So there's really nothing for me to say other than I totally second and agree that, we should revisit this like the outreach, the education component at a later time.
Excellent. I know that's one of your specialties, Andy. So I look forward to speaking to you more about that. Dr. Yoon?
And then one more, just quick, is there a possibility that we can increase the fees for people who are unlicensed? That are,
So we,
go ahead.
Are you talking about like a registration for unlicensed naturopaths?
No, for those who are impeding upon our Practice Act that we're finding for advertising as a naturopathic doctor or, for us.
Yes.
We are investigating
so
that.
Yeah, so what we do is we actually send a kind of an educational letter first, and we say, hey, you may be, in violation of, and we give them all of the different codes that they may be in violation of. We give them, we give them an example of where we're seeing where their violation is. And then we give them 30 days to comply and to fix whatever it is that they're violating. Now, we have had people that will comply, and then we go back and take a look 30 days later, and they put the stuff right back up on their website. And so those people, we don't even mess with them anymore. We just issue a $5,000 citation. So, yes, we do have those. When we get those violations and there's no compliance, then we do a cite and fine.
Okay, and there's.
But the cap is 5,000.
Yes, the cap is 5,000.
Okay.
Statutorily for the whole department, actually, unless you have specialized statutory authority. But most of the department, it's 5,000.
Okay.
And the one unfortunate thing with going after the unlicensed activity is there's no way to recoup that. If we send these cases to Division of Investigations and pay tens of thousands of dollars on these investigations or the undercovers or whatever it is that we do, and there's just no way to get that back because they don't have a license that's that is on the line. So. We do what we do. We get the $5,000 citation if we are able to cite them. And if they don't pay, we can go after them with the Franchise Tax Board. But, we're really limited in getting that, that expense back. So it's a tough place to be, but it is, making sure that the consumers are safe. So, we're kind of in a hard place on that one.
Do you have a percentage of how much of those fees we have recouped out of the ones that we've sent out for citations?
We can get those for you. Right now, again, the enforcement's about 75% of the population is unlicensed. A lot of those do come into compliance, so we don't ever have to get to that citation portion and fining, but we may have to revisit that. We've done so much education now as these naturopaths know the law. Their professional association knows the laws, and I think at this point, the people that are doing these violations they know, and they're just doing them anyway. So we may get to a point where we're just going to start citing more, but we really have to take a look at that and speak with our legal and the AG's department just to make sure that we're on the right track.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Right. If there are no other comments from the board members, we are going to open for public comment.
All right, this is the moderator. We do have one member of the public on the call. So if you would like to make a public comment on this item, you can click the raise hand icon next to your name, or you can click the Q&A feature down at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. All right, and while we wait for the person on WebEx, if they want to submit a comment, can I also confirm that there are no members of the public in the in-person locations?
There's no public in Sacramento.
There's no public in Monterey Park.
There's none in San Rafael.
There's none in San Francisco.
There's none in Fresno.
All right, and it appears there are no requests for public comment on WebEx. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Thank you so much. At this point, we're going to take a 10-minute break. It is 12:01, so we'll be back at 12:11. We do have lunch scheduled for around 1 o'clock. So just so you know, you are going to be getting another break. I look forward to speaking to everyone soon. Are people back online? Rebecca, can you do a roll call?
I sure can. All right, Dr. Dara Thompson.
Present.
Dr. Mina Yoon.
Present.
Dr. Vera Singleton. Dr. Singleton. Or we'll come back to Dr. Singleton. Dr. Satara Tice.
Present.
Thank you. Dr. Deparshi Mukherjee. We will come back to Dr. Mukherjee. Mr. Andy Yam.
Sorry, I'm here. Present.
Oh, thank you so much. Gotcha. Mr. Andy Yam.
Present.
Thank you. And Dr. Bruce Davidson.
Present.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Singleton, are you back with us?
I am, yes, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. And everybody is back and we have quorum.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. At this point, I'd like to just kind of go back to the beginning and do the review and possible approval of the board meeting minutes from the October 4th, 2024 meeting. Those were available in your meeting materials. Does anyone have any comments or edits for those board meeting minutes?
This is Christy Shields, Regulations Counsel. Could you just add me as staff present to the minutes?
Gotcha, Christy.
Good.
Okay, thank you. Of course. Any other amendments?
Okay, seeing no other comments, I'm going to open it for public comment.
This is the moderator. It appears there are no members of the public on the WebEx call.
Thank you. Hearing that, I move to approve the October 4th, 2024 board meeting minutes with the edit that we just added, adding Christy as staff.
This is Dr. Mina Yoon. I'll second it.
Great, thank you so much. And so we're going to go ahead and do a roll call to approve the 10/4/24 meeting minutes with amendments. Dr. Dara Thompson?
Aye.
Dr. Mina Yoon?
Aye.
Dr. Vera Singleton?
Aye.
Dr. Satara Tice? Thank you. Dr. Deparshi Mukherjee?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Andy Yam? And Dr. Bruce Davidson?
I will abstain as I was not present at the meeting.
Okay. And that moves with 6.
Wonderful. So we will move on to agenda item number 4, which is discussion and possible action on the executive officer's report. And I'll turn that over to Rebecca.
Great. It's just a really short update this time around. So program update, as you know, we still have the 2 vacancies for board members. 1 professional member needs to be an ND, a naturopathic doctor, licensed in the state of California. This position has been vacant since February 2022. And there's also 1 physician and surgeon vacancy, which can be filled by an MD allopathic or an osteopathic physician. And this position's been vacant since September 2019. We will continue working with Melissa's team and the governor's office, appointments office, to get these positions filled. And so, like she was saying, if anybody knows of anybody that would be interested in those positions, please have them contact me, and then I can give them all of the information that they need in order to send in their information to the governor's office. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and move along to the licensing stats. Thank you. So the application types that we've received, the applications processed between October 1st, 2024 and December 31st, 2024 for quarter 2, we received 14 license applications and approved 28. We've received 30 initial license fees and approved 31, and received 201 renewal applications and approved 201 applications. There is a difference you'll notice in the numbers, and that's because there are some license applications that we had from quarter 1 that were approved in quarter 2. So you'll see a little bit of a discrepancy there in the received versus the approved. Our total licensee count as of December 31st, 2024 is 1,541. Of those, there are 1,039 active and current licensees, 29 inactive licensees, 130 that are in a delinquent status. And as you know, this can stay in a delinquent status for 3 years before their license automatically cancels. And there are 343 other which are in retired or canceled statuses or coming up on that canceled status. All right. Any questions about the licensing before we move on to the enforcement? All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on. So the case intake and closure for quarter 2 between October 1st, 2024 and December 31st, 2024, we had 16 new cases. Of those 16 cases, 4 of them were licensees and 12 of them were unlicensed cases. 14 cases were closed and 1 citation was issued. The unlicensed versus licensed enforcement activity continues to be a burden on our program, accounts for 75% of board's enforcement caseload. The board has increased educational outreach to traditional naturopaths who use the ND title without a license or violate the Naturopathic Doctors Act. The compliance is often achieved before action or citations or fines are issued. The unlicensed cases, there are 16 pending. These violations include the misuse of ND title, the failure to provide a written disclaimer of unlicensed practice, diagnosis or treatment outside of their legal scope, and advising discontinuation of prescribed medications or causing harm or death to clients. The licensed cases that we have pending currently in our enforcement unit is 10. Of those violations, we have 6 of them, or 60% of them, are for unprofessional conduct. That could include sexual misconduct. We have 3 cases, or 30%, of incompetence or unsafe practice, and 1 or 10% cases for subsequent arrests. The overall enforcement caseload currently sitting and pending at our board is 26 cases. Again, 16 of those are unlicensed individuals, and licensees, I'm sorry, the license or applications, applicants are 10. So there's 62% of the caseload is unlicensed, and 38% of those are licensees. But however, in Q2, 75% of the Q2 enforcement case was 75% unlicensed. All right, are there any questions of those numbers today?
Just a quick question. Is there any fees for a retired status?
Not yet. That is something that we were looking into. We are still looking at it, but those are one of the regulations that we have pending right now that we're going to be looking at.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? All right, Dr. Davidson.
Thanks. So could you just remind me or us again, so with the, particularly with the licensed violations for incompetence or unsafe practice, so the fact that those are here means that they're under investigation in some fashion?
That is correct, yes. And if we take action on those, it may come in front of the board, depending on what action needs to be taken. So you guys would not necessarily know about these unless we actually find merit to them, and that would happen after an investigation, and if it was to be sent to the AGs for investigation and processing through the Attorney General's office.
And thank you. And the investigation is undertaken by which office?
That would be the Department of Consumer Affairs Division of Investigation.
Okay, and that's part of what we pay for, right?
Yes, that is. We pay a pro rata with them, and it's a little difficult to explain. Maybe I'll have to bring budgets here, but it's a roll forward. So basically, we will pay in 2 years what we use this year for our enforcement actions for investigations. And basically that is so that we don't have to stop investigating. However, you know, we always make sure that we're investigating things that we need to investigate. So priority things, of course, if we had something that comes in that is very egregious, that goes straight over there. And we do have priorities of different types of enforcement cases that will go over, or things that can be done at the desk investigation first to see if there's any merit, and then that would be sent on to investigations if there was more to it than just a you know, minor violation.
Okay, and then thank you. And then the investigations that you were just describing, are they also undertaken for the violations among the unlicensed cases?
Yes, it is. For a lot of those cases, if there is public harm, then, and it's not just a title use, a misuse of title, then those do go over to our Division of Investigation. And what happens is they will do their investigation to see if they're actually working under a naturopathic doctor's scope, if they're portraying themselves as a naturopathic doctor. There's a gamut of things that they could do, undercover investigations, that kind of thing.
Okay, and then the one bullet point there that's causing harm or death to clients. So for these bullet points, you did not show the numbers, but in any case, there was at least one, I guess, that fell into that category.
Yeah, there's definitely at least one of them that falls under that. I can tell you that the majority of these are just misuse of title. However, we have received a lot of the cases. I would say probably about half of them, and I can have Florencia go into them and actually look to see, but about half of them I would say fall into the working under a naturopathic doctor's scope. They're either providing diagnosis, they're, telling them to stop taking, cancer medications or medications that were prescribed by their general practitioner. So these are the types of things that we investigate. If there was somebody that was there was death or patient harm, those will go automatically over to DFI.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rebecca, for clarifying and explaining all that. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course, and what I'll do is next time we can break those down for you so that you can see what those stats are. Were there any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Is that the end of your executive officer's report, Rebecca?
Yes, yes, it is. Thank you.
Wonderful. Let's call for public comment.
This is the moderator. It appears there are no members of the public on the WebEx call.
No public members in Sacramento.
None in San Rafael.
None in Lafayette.
None in San Francisco.
None in Fresno.
Great. So we're going to move on to agenda item 5, which is status update and report of the board's current rulemaking proposals. Is that you, Rebecca, or do we have someone here for that?
All right, give me one moment. So the status update report of the board's current rulemaking proposals. You will find this attachment. Actually, no, it's not an attachment. It's the next screen. Thank you. So basically, this is an update of what we have pending currently for our rulemaking. The name change, or the Section 100, is what we'll be going over today. So that is ready for the board review and possible action at today's meeting. We're hoping to get that worked and done today so that we can get it filed. So if that is approved by you guys today, then we can move forward with that. Delegation of functions, that is currently being worked by staff, regulatory counsel. We will be getting some stuff over to the budget office, and that is moving through the pipeline. We are projecting that package will be going over for projected publication for May 2025 is kind of what we were hoping for. I think it may be a little bit before that. It may be sooner, yeah. Our fees, again, that was effective January 1st, 2025. Our inactive status allow for inactive fee to collect half of current active status, notice of publication estimated for July 2025. The retired status is under development. Right now, we need to determine the appropriate fee for the application process, and the authority for that is BPC 464. We show or anticipate the notice of publication is estimated for July 2025 on that one. For the IV injection therapy, staff's currently researching infection control for action in this area. We are reconvening the advisory committee during today's meeting and propose to submit by the end of 2026. it may be sooner, but there's a lot of work on that one. So we're really anticipating it to be a little bit out there still. And then we've also added one. This is going to be the disciplinary guidelines and the uniform standards. Now, I know that some of you that have been on this board for a while know that we've kind of touched on the disciplinary guidelines once before and had been told to wait. And this is when we were still under the osteopathic board because they were getting theirs done and they were going to kind of use it as a template for ours. Since we are no longer under the osteopathic medical board, we're going to start working this as well. This is a really important one. The legislature is probably going to ask us what's going on with this, since this is something that all the boards and bureaus really need to have for the Attorney General's office. So we are going to be working on this. The staff will start working with the Regulatory Council on this package, and the notice of publication is estimated for September 2025 on this one. Do we have any questions on these? And again, these are estimated dates. It could be sooner, it could be a little bit pushed out, just depends on what our workload is. No questions? All right.
Any members of the public joined?
This is the moderator. There are no members of the public on the WebEx call.
Great.
No
And
public in Sacramento.
None in San Rafael?
None in Lafayette.
None in San Francisco.
None in Fresno.
None in Monterey Park.
Wonderful. Okay. Excuse me. We are moving on to agenda item number 6, discussion and possible action to make non-substantive rule changes per section 100 of Title I of the California Code and Regulations. I believe, Rebecca, this is just about switching all of the names from committee to board. Is that correct?
That is correct. And we've also made some changes, other technical changes, basically taking out gender-specific titles and changing those. And I think that is, oh, and the address. And I think those are the only items that are being changed in this. They're very non-substantive, I cannot say that, substantive changes. And these are just things that our board can do in a little bit of an easier rulemaking package, and that's what a Section 100 is.
So this is Christy Shields, Regulations Counsel for the board. So the Section 100 rulemaking process is in Title I, California Code of Regulations, and it's a process that allows boards, bureaus, and agencies of the state to update their regulations and clean up technical issues like syntax, grammar, punctuation. Board name change is something you have no discretion. You have to go by the name you were given by the legislature. Things that you cannot on your own decide not to do. So the justification statement that's attached in attachment 2 to your meeting materials includes a pretty robust explanation for all the changes, but generally, as Ms. Mitchell indicated, we're talking about name changes, address changes, gender pronoun removal and substitution with a gender-neutral nouns, and other statutory changes where you have no discretion to use or add the information required, including collecting the individual taxpayer identification number. That law change happened a while ago where each state agency has to collect either a Social Security number or an I-10 to process an individual application. And so we added that in because your current regulations only refer to the Social Security number. So it's those sorts of types of changes that we're asking for approval to make on your behalf. It's an expedited procedure. There is no notice and comment periods for the public. It just gets filed directly with the Office of Administrative Law. They have 30 working days to review it, and you would have an answer probably early March. Probably sooner, whether you have approval to make all those changes, and the changes would happen, effective on filing. So it's quite a expedited procedure. It's a great way to clean up things. And so I think I recommend going forward annually looking at the regs to see if we can do these kinds of housekeeping changes on a regular basis.
Christy.
So what exactly
So
are we
if you-
voting on today?
So if you look on page 2 of the memo, we're asking if you agree with those kinds of changes, and what's in attachment 1 is the language that you're approving. That we would ask you to move motion A as set forth in the meeting materials.
That would be the attachment item 6. And the justification for change is your attachment 6A. And 6B was just all the proposed regulatory language changes that were made.
And the changes are shown in underline and strike through.
Are there any questions? Okay, if there's no questions and you guys are okay with the changes that are being proposed, then there should probably be a move for motion A, and that is to approve the proposed regulatory text described in attachment 1 and authorize the executive officer to take all necessary steps to pursue the rulemaking through the Title I CCR Section 100 rulemaking process, make any non-substantive changes to the text and/or rulemaking package as needed throughout the process, and adopt the changes as described in the proposed text.
I'll make a motion to include all of that.
For motion A?
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Yoon. Do we have a second?
Second the motion.
Thank you, Dr. Tice. And I'll take a roll call to adopt motion A. Oh, I'm sorry, we need a public comment. So sorry.
This is the moderator. There are no members of the public on the WebEx call.
No members of the public in Sacramento.
None in Lafayette.
There are none in San Francisco.
There are none in Fresno.
None in Monterey Park.
Perfect. All right, I will go ahead and take a roll call. Dr. Dara Thompson.
Aye.
Dr. Mina Yoon.
Aye.
Dr. Vera Singleton.
Aye.
Dr. Satara Tice.
Aye.
Great, thank you. Dr. Parshi Mukherjee.
Aye.
Mr. Andy Yam.
Aye.
Dr. Bruce Davidson.
Aye.
Thank you, and that motion moves with 7.
And with that, this is Christy Shields. I'll excuse myself, Christy Shields, Board Counsel and Board Regulations Counsel, unless you need me for anything else.
Thank you for being here, Christy.
Thank you. Thank you, Christy.
Okay, that was agenda item 6. We have already completed agenda items 7 and 8. So we would then move on to agenda item 9, which is discussion and possible action on reconvening the Board Advisory Committee, formerly known as a subcommittee. So we're renaming this. And this is the IV and Advanced Injection Therapy Advisory Committee. That was just previously mentioned. So we do need to get this finished. So we need our advisory committee to reconvene. as of right now, I think the only people on that committee were myself and then Dr. Virginia Osborne, because Dr.
That's
Singleton
correct.
was no longer able to do that. Do we need more than 2 people?
No, we don't. And as a matter of fact, it may be easier for you guys to work in a, you know, a group of 2. That way we don't have to, yeah, we don't have to notice those. So you guys would be able to work on an ad hoc basis and then just bring that information back to the board, the full board.
Okay, great. I do believe that Dr. Osborne's still okay with being on that committee.
She is. I reached out to her a short time ago and she was still available. And
great. So do we just need to vote to reconvene it? Or is there something we specifically need to do?
No, I will just check with our legal, but I think that you as the president have the ability to either appoint a committee under the board without any motions. Is that correct? Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so yes, I'm going to reconvene this committee. Hopefully we can work on this fairly aggressively through 2025 to try and meet that 2026 deadline of completion. I know there are some things that the staff are working on as far as infection control, and they can get that information to us.
Perfect. We will get that out to you, and then I'll reach out to Dr. Osborne and we'll get you guys a meeting so that you guys can kind of come together and we'll look and see what we need to do on that one.
Okay, sounds good. All right, is there any public comment on this item?
This is the moderator. There are no members of the public on the WebEx call.
There are none
no
in San
public in Sacramento. Sorry.
No members of the public in Monterey Park.
None in Lafayette.
There are none in San Francisco.
None in Fresno.
Great. Thank you.
All right, so the next agenda item has to do with the other subcommittees. The first of these was the Prescribing and Furnishing Authority of Naturopathic Doctors Advisory Committee. And this has to do with formulary, both current and also proposed if there is scope modernization. And then the second is the Minor Office Procedures Advisory Committee, and that has to do with minor office procedures, such as suturing, mole removal, things like that. Do we have any members of these committees currently?
Yes, we do. So for the Prescribing and Furnishing Advisory Committee, we have Dr. Mina Yoon, who is still on it, Dr. Peter Koshland, who is the pharmacist that is consulting with the advisory committee. And the physician that we had was Dr. Quinn, who is no longer on the board. So we would need a physician member of the board or a physician consultant outside the board to be on this advisory committee.
Hi, this is Dr. Mukherjee. I'm happy to join this, Rebecca.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
No worries. Thank you.
I am happy to appoint you, Dr. Mukherjee.
Thank you.
Outstanding. Okay, and for the minor office procedures, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just think our goal should be to at least have one meeting of all of these advisory committees before our next board meeting in May.
Perfect. I will send out a doodle for the 3 members of the Prescribing and Furnishing Advisory Committee, along with the IV therapy. For the minor office procedures, we still have Dr. Bruce Davidson on this committee. We had for the naturopathic doctor position, we had Dr. D'Amico, and for the physician position, we had Dr. Spar. Both of those members are no longer with the board. So we would need one naturopathic doctor on this, and we would also need a physician member.
I can join this one as well, Rebecca.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mukherjee.
Sure.
Do any of our naturopathic doctors feel passionate about minor office procedures? No one seems to be jumping on that one.
If you guys know of a naturopathic doctor who is maybe a subject matter expert in minor office procedures, if they are maybe also, I guess, licensed in Oregon, if you guys know of somebody, we can reach out to see if there's somebody that would be willing to consult with the advisory committee on this. But we do need to have a naturopathic doctor on this advisory committee.
Rebecca, and can you clarify again what qualifications would they need if they are a naturopathic doc?
So your guys' education, just going through naturopathic medical school, provides you with the simple minor office procedures that normal naturopathic doctors would do in naturopathic medicine throughout the, North America. So if you went to a naturopathic school, you should have at least the knowledge that we need to move forward with the advisory role. Basically, we just need somebody that would be able to speak on the education and training for naturopathic doctors in this field.
And just to clarify, they don't have to be in California. I think that's what you just said.
They should be in California, but they can also be licensed in another state that allows them to practice this. But we would really want to find somebody that's licensed in California.
Understood.
It looks like we may need to move this subcommittee to the next meeting so we can try and find a naturopathic doctor who's appropriate.
Okay.
I mean, I would be able to do it, but I really do feel like I should just focus on the IV therapy because that does need to get done.
Yeah, that's some heavy lifting on the IV therapy too. That's a lot. So no worries. I will reach out to a couple of resources and see if we can find somebody that would be willing to consult with this and be on the advisory committee.
Right. I mean, maybe we could just look at Bastyr in San Diego and see who teaches it there.
Perfect. I can do that. Okay, I will reach out to Bastyr. And then I will send a doodle to both the two advisory committees that we've reestablished and reconvened to get some dates for a meeting before the next May 14th meeting.
Thank you. Of
course.
All right. Let's just see if there's any members of the public who need to comment on this agenda item. Moderator?
This is the moderator. There are no members of the public on the WebEx call.
All right, there are none in San Rafael.
No members in Lafayette.
There are no members in San Francisco.
None in Monterey Park.
None in Fresno.
And no members in Sacramento.
Great, we are making progress here. So moving on to agenda item 11, discussion and possible action to create a legislative advisory committee. So this would be another committee, and that would be mainly around legislation. Do you want to flesh that out at all? The description?
Actually, yeah. Yeah, and I'm sorry, this was my mistake. I don't know why I put this back on. I had it, for whatever reason, written down on my last notes, but we actually did get a advisory committee during our October 4th meeting. We discussed and agreed to create a legislative committee, and our members, Mr. Andy Yam and Dr. Yoon, volunteered to work on this committee. So as long as they're both still in agreement and available to work on this committee, I think we already have this one.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
true.
Great. So you guys, we just need to get you scheduled. So we need to add that to the doodle list. Rebecca.
Yes, that's what I was going to ask
I
there.
got it on my.
Rebecca. Okay.
And I just want to take this moment to just give some kudos to Rebecca again for everything she does, all the things she did in preparation for this meeting, recovering from her, ankle injury, etc. You never stop, Rebecca, and we appreciate you.
I don't know, this boot has me stopped a little bit. Not gonna lie, but thank you, I appreciate that. And my staff does a lot of heavy lifting when I'm unavailable, so kudos to my staff as well.
Absolutely. Great. I guess, do we even need to ask for public comment on this?
Since it's agendized, this is Yuping Lin, Board Council Assistant, is agendized. Let's check really quickly, see if there's any members of the public that have joined.
All right, moderator.
This is the moderator. There are no members of the public on the WebEx call.
There are none in San Rafael.
There are none in Lafayette.
No members to San Francisco?
And none in Fresno.
None in Monterey Park.
And none in Sacramento.
Okay. The next agenda item is the update, discussion, and possible action on the 2025 legislation impact. The board and Department of Consumer Affairs and/or naturopathic doctors profession. So there's the legislative calendar. Didn't we just go through the legislative calendar with one of our presenters?
We did. We put it under here, but he had actually gave it to us as well. So he just kind of went over it with you since he was here. Yeah. So basically, this was your guys' opportunity to discuss any legislation that you may want to propose. And we kind of went through some of this when we were discussing ways to bring in more funding. So I'm not sure that there's a lot left to speak about, but this would give you guys that time to have this discussion if you wanted to bring it up now, or if you wanted to continue to keep it on the next meeting, we can do that as well.
Well, I think both the legislative calendar and the sunset calendar were already discussed, so we don't need to do those again.
Right.
The question is whether we want to discuss this in detail today. I do just want to let people know that we are required to break for lunch at 1. So if we were to expand this to a larger discussion, we would need to reconvene at 1:45 to do that, because we're bumping right up against that mandatory time that we would need to take a break and or adjourn.
And this may be a time that you guys want to save for when we get those questions from the Sunset Committee, because I know that this was kind of surrounding that, what legislation or what issues that you may be bringing forth during Sunset or kind of working through Sunset. So this may be something that, we, once we get those questions from the legislature that you guys may want to, at that time, go into further discussion on that. And I know during our last sunset review, we had a couple of different ad hoc groups with the members of the board that helped work on the sunset report as well. So it may be something that you guys want to hold off until the next meeting.
When do we expect to get those questions regarding the sunset? Like, will we have them in advance of the next meeting such that we can look over them before that meeting?
So I can actually get a copy of the questions from other boards. I don't think that they've changed much since this time last year. If there are, there's probably one or two questions that may have been changed or amended, but I can get those and bring them to the next board meeting. I would say usually sometime between May and June is when we typically would get contacted by the legislature, whichever committee is going to be running our bill.
So probably we would not have those questions prior to the meeting, but we would have an idea of what the questions may be prior to the next meeting. And then we did have an agenda item for the next meeting. I'm trying to remember the exact wording of it. That had to do with some of the legislative issues. Do you remember that, Rebecca?
Yeah. Scope modernization issues, working with other professions, outreach and education.
Yeah, okay, great. So as long as those are on the next meeting's agenda.
I'll add sunset on there as well, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussion around sunset moving forward.
Yeah, I think there needs to be. When are the sunset hearings again? I know he did go over that at the beginning, but I'm just trying to remember right now.
So let me go back to that really quick. So it looks like we should be having the template report to the legislature by December 2025. And then at that point, it starts moving forward after that. So we'll end up getting a background paper, I would say, I think it's usually about 60 days after that. So sometime in February. March 2026 is when the hearings begin. It'll be a 2-day hearing that they schedule. And that's when the president and myself will go and testify, and like last time. And then we will get questions after that, and we will have to answer all of the questions that we get from the legislature, if there are any, just like we did last time.
Great, thank you for that, Rebecca. Are there any questions or comments on this agenda item? All right, seeing none here, let's just check and see if there's any members of the public. Moderator?
This is the moderator. There are no members of the public on the WebEx call.
There are none in San Rafael?
Or none in San Francisco?
None in Monterey Park.
None in Fresno?
There are none in Lafayette.
None in Sacramento? Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. So the next agenda item, which is future agenda items and next meeting dates, Rebecca, I think we got all our meeting dates. Didn't you just,
We have all of the meeting dates for 2025. I was just putting an option for you guys to look at your first quarter of 2026 so that we can get rooms, because availability goes quick. And I know that your guys' schedules fill up pretty quick. So I wanted to give you the option, if you wanted to at this time, to look at your schedules for the first quarter of 2026. And just as a reminder, there may be some additional, because it is a sunset year going into sunset, there may be some additional meetings that we have near the end of the year. I'm sorry, excuse me, at the end of the year, just because we have to get our report done.
It's generally how it goes.
Yeah.
Dr. Yoon has a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure, but I believe that my term is supposed to be up, or at least a good number of us, our term will be up in 2026. I'm not sure if it starts in January.
Yeah, let me take a look at that. I think you guys begin your grace period, so I think you'll still be in a grace period for 2026.
Okay, the entire 2026?
Yes, unless they find somebody to replace you, and I don't see them working that quickly, so.
Yes. History has told us that no, they're not going to.
It would also be good if we just had like most members of the current board through sunset, just in general, because the people working on it would be nice if those are the people testifying, et cetera. But yeah, I hear you, Dr. Yoon.
Okay.
Personally, I'm not able to have any opinion about next January's schedule yet, but I'm sure I can make anything work.
I just put it down as an option if you guys wanted to. We can definitely look at this as we move forward in our next upcoming meetings.
Great. Does anyone have any future agenda items to discuss?
As a reminder, we have scope modernization challenges, working with other professions, outreach, education, and sunset issues.
We did develop several future agenda items while in the meeting. I would also put updates from the 3 advisory committees that are going to try to meet. And that'd be the IV therapy, an injection therapy advisory committee, the prescribing and furnishing authority of naturopathic doctors advisory committee, and the legislative advisory committee. Since they're all going to meet, they could give us little updates in the meeting. And then hopefully we can put the formation of the minor office procedures on the agenda, the minor office procedures advisory committee on the agenda. Hopefully we will have found a naturopathic doctor by that time.
Perfect.
All right. Any public comment on this, our last item?
This is the moderator. It appears there are no requests, or there are no members of the public on the WebEx call.
There are none in Santa Fe.
None in Monterey Park.
Or none in Lafayette?
None in Fresno.
None in Sacramento. Do we have any in Monterey Park?
Bruce already spoke. It just overlaid a little bit with Mina.
Oh,
sorry, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Great. Wow, we actually managed to finish before lunch. That was very efficient. Thank you for everyone for showing up. It's great to have everyone here at the meeting. I know how busy your schedules all are. Looking forward to seeing everyone in May. At this point, we're adjourning the Naturopathic Medical, the California Board of Naturopathic Medicine's meeting. It is January 23rd, 2025 at 1:03 p.m. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.